You weren't supposed to sleep with that rosary. You thought it was holy. You thought it was yours. But it never answered your prayers, did it? You felt that, didn't you? The silence after Amen. The air growing colder around your pillow. The way your fingers hesitated just before touching it again. Don't lie to your soul now. There was a night, maybe more than one, when you prayed and something else listened. Not God, not Mary, something beneath your words, something that remembered the first time those beads were held. And by whom? I'm not telling you this to scare you. I came because you never asked who touched it before you did. You never questioned why you couldn't sleep after using it. You never asked why the dreams began after the rosary came. I've said this before, not every rosary belongs near a bed. Some should be buried, others should never be touched again. You think I'm talking about someone else, but I saw the way you placed it beside your pillow. I saw your lips moving with fear, not faith. You weren't praying, you were bargaining, and it hurt you. There was a woman, older than you, who used to sleep with the same rosary. It smelled like incense and dried hands. After 3 nights, she dreamed of a chapel flooding with black water. She kept waking at 3:33, and when she finally stopped praying, she said, "It wasn't my voice anymore." Have you ever felt that? Your own prayer sounding foreign, like your soul had stepped aside for something else to speak? Tell me in the comments if you've ever felt this quietly. Don't be ashamed. The dark doesn't begin when you close your eyes. It begins when you put trust into something sacred without knowing it's already been claimed. Do you remember where you got that rosary? A gift, a funeral, a secondhand shop left behind in a drawer after someone moved out? I whispered once, "Cursed objects don't scream, they pray with you." You didn't know that, did you? Let me tell you a secret that cost someone their soul. A young man came to me once. He had been using his grandmother's rosary, thinking it would bring peace, but it didn't. But she had cursed it before dying, whispering the name of someone she never forgave into the beads. That hatred sank into the wood, and every time he prayed, her bitterness echoed behind his words. One night, he whispered, "Holy Mary," and something laughed. Have you ever felt something move in your room when your mouth is still praying? Maybe you did it too, without knowing. Because rosaries are not just objects, they are witnesses. They carry voices, they hold memory, not all of it holy. Sometimes, a rosary becomes a ladder that leads down instead of up, especially when kept near the head, where dreams are most vulnerable, especially when slept on. Press close to where the soul releases nightly, especially when it carries someone else's unfinished war with God. And now, it rests beside you, still, waiting. I know you feel it, that cold spot near your bed, the dreams you don't want to describe, the feeling that something watches, but never blinks. It's not paranoia, it's residue. I once placed my fingers on a rosary given by a grieving widow, and I wept. I said, "This chain does not lead to heaven. It drags. You still have time, you can still undo it, even now, but you need to know something. When you hold a rosary, heaven listens, but so do other things. And if it's been touched by bitterness or rage, or black rituals disguised as prayer, then every Ave Maria you whisper becomes a key. You weren't supposed to know this, but I'm telling you now, because if you keep sleeping with that rosary near your bed, one night you'll stop waking up as yourself. You were still holding the rosary when your soul stepped aside. You didn't notice it at first, just a strange warmth in the beads, a silence that lingered too long, a breath that wasn't yours, pausing between holy and Mary. Not every possession begins with a scream. Some begin with permission. Quiet, soft, unaware. You gave it out of exhaustion, out of loneliness. In that moment you whispered, "Please, someone, just listen." And something did. I've seen this before. I've looked into the eyes of souls still praying, lips moving perfectly. But the light behind them had already gone dim. Some souls don't lose themselves, they are replaced. One woman came to me in tears, not because she was haunted, but because she felt too calm. She told me, "It's like someone else is praying for me now." I looked into her eyes and said, "Maybe someone is." Have you ever woken from a dream that felt too long, not terrifying, just endless, like you'd been somewhere you weren't meant to stay? Have you ever stood in a church and forgotten the words you've known for years, not because your memory failed, but because they didn't feel like they belonged to you anymore? That's how it begins. The rosary becomes the mouthpiece, the vessel. And if it once belonged to someone bitter, jealous, or spiritually inverted, every bead becomes a door, and all it takes is for you to be tired enough, broken enough to open one by accident. This isn't possession, it's permission, it's spiritual trespass. It's your soul whispering, "Take over just for tonight." And they do. They love rosaries, not because of the light or the prayers, but because of the trust, because of the surrender, because you believe anything bearing a cross must be safe. That's where they hide. I once held my own rosary for hours in silence, feeling heaven breathe through the rhythm. But there was one rosary I refused to touch. A nun brought it to me. It was silver, beautiful, still warm. She said it comforted a dying man, a man who cursed God with his final breath. She found it under his pillow. I reached out, my fingers grazed its edge, and I pulled away because it burned. This rosary, when I said, has no voice, only memory. It does not speak, it plays. You think this can't happen to you? Then answer me. Have you ever prayed for something selfish and received it, even when you knew you shouldn't have? Even when it came too quickly, too easily, with a price that showed up later? That price might have been you. Another woman came to me, holding her son's rosary. She said she prayed with it every night, until she whispered, "If you're there, come through me." Same chair, same candle, same tear-stained Hail Marys. One night she whispered, "If you're there, come through me." And something did. She stopped crying after that. She stopped sleeping too. People said she was grieving, but the priest who visited her told me the rosary was cold, icy cold, even in her hands. She told me once she heard her son's voice in her sleep, but he didn't call her Mama. He called her Maria. That wasn't her name. She tried to confess 3 times but couldn't remember what for. One night she didn't hold the rosary, but her fingers still moved in the dark. You've felt it too, haven't you? That moment when the prayer continues but your spirit doesn't, when the rhythm stays but the soul drifts. That's when they slip in, under the cover of routine. If any of this feels familiar, write it below, not because you owe me an explanation, but because someone else watching needs to know they're not alone. I once told a man who kept dreaming of crucifixes breaking in his hands, it is not the object that breaks, it is the protection. He'd been sleeping with a rosary his ex-lover gave him. She begged him to come back. He refused. She kissed the rosary and left. 2 months later, he woke up with scratches on his chest. No blood, no wound, just pain, and a phrase in his mind, "Finish what you left." His soul wasn't taken, but it was being negotiated, night after night. That's how they work, these spiritual exchanges. When you're too tired to guard your spirit, you hand over the keys and don't even realize it. And sometimes even after the prayer ends, they don't leave. Maybe your rosary isn't cursed, maybe it was just forgotten, left unblessed, left in grief, left in rage. That's enough. A sacred object abandoned becomes a sacred object available. And tell me, who do you think claims what's left behind? If you still sleep with it near your bed, ask yourself honestly, has it helped, or has it only stayed silent? Because silence can be sacred, or it can be strategic. Tonight, if you dare touch it again, don't move too quickly. Feel it, listen, not with your ears, but with your soul. And then ask it, in the dark, who's praying through me now? There will come a day when this memory returns. You'll be standing somewhere unaware and suddenly it will hit you. You weren't alone the night you thought you were praying. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't your voice. Your soul forgets, but the beads do not. You think it's over because you stopped praying, because you moved the rosary to a drawer, because you told yourself it was just in your head. But rosaries don't forget the hands that held them. or the promises whispered into them, or the tears they absorbed night after night. I once said this to a man who no longer recognized his own voice in prayer. A rosary remembers even when a soul repents, and sometimes it remembers instead of you. You don't need to believe me. You only need to feel the weight of it in your palm again. Go on, pick it up. Feel how familiar it still is, like a memory pressed into wood, not just yours. Do you know how many prayers that rosary has heard? How many were said with clean hearts? How many were said in rage, or in manipulation, or worse, in spiritual betrayal? There are beads that have been used to pray for death. There are beads that have been kissed with hate. There are beads that have been worn during sin, then gripped as if that cancels it. And yours may carry none of that, but are you sure? I once held a rosary that belonged to a dying man. He had spent his life pretending to be devout, but used his rosary to bargain behind closed doors. Prayers for power, prayers to bind others' will, prayers said without faith but full of control. When I touched it, I wept, not from grief, from nausea. This rosary, when I said, was used like a leash, each bead still tight around someone's neck. The man was buried with it. But 3 months later, his widow found a second rosary, identical, in the drawer of his desk. The priest swore it was the same one. But tell me, how can something buried still be warm? You don't realize it, do you? How objects remember the parts of you that you've buried, the fear you won't name, the jealousy you dismissed, the moment you said, God, if you love me, prove it, and meant it like a threat. That rosary remembers. It remembers the night you begged for someone to suffer so you could feel loved. It remembers when you held it and didn't believe but still asked anyway. It remembers the deal you tried to make in the dark. Maybe you don't, but it does, and sometimes it keeps praying. There are houses where no one lives anymore, but the air still feels watched. There are beds where no one sleeps anymore, but the mattress still sags in one place. There are rosaries that haven't been touched in years, but still echo when the light goes out. Have you ever walked past a drawer and felt like something inside wanted to be picked up again? Have you ever heard a prayer in your mind that you never said? These aren't ghosts. These are remnants, spiritual residue, fragments of desire still alive in sacred things. If you've ever felt this, write it, not for me, for the next soul who needs confirmation they're not losing their mind. And hear me clearly now, when something sacred is misused, it doesn't scream, it hums. I've heard that hum. It doesn't come from the air, it comes from inside, like the memory of a note you never sang, but your bones recognize. She came to me once after her husband passed. She brought his rosary and said it helped her sleep. Until the dream started, she was devoted, honest, pure in faith, but every time she used it, she dreamed of someone else, a stranger with hollow eyes kneeling at the edge of her bed, whispering her own prayers before she could. She changed the locks, moved houses, threw the rosary in a river. But the dreams followed, not because the object had power, but because the prayer had roots, roots that had sunk into her, roots from someone else's soul. You see, when you pick up a rosary, you inherit more than the rhythm. You inherit the silence behind it, the echoes it's still carrying. And if no one ever cleared them, if no blessing reset the chain, then every Ave Maria could be someone else's unfinished sentence. You're not paranoid, you're remembering something your mind forgot, but your soul didn't. Do you know what scares the spirits I faced the most? It wasn't holy water, it wasn't crucifixes, it was being remembered. Because when you name the presence, it loses its disguise. So name it. Name the moment the rosary changed in your hand. Name the prayer you regret saying. Name the silence that didn't feel like peace. Name the shadow that answered when heaven didn't. You can still undo it. Even now, take the rosary, hold it, and speak not with fear but with ownership. Say this: any voice that is not mine, any prayer that is not clean, you are no longer welcome. Then light a candle, not because of superstition, but because light remembers what you tried to forget. When the soul forgets, the light continues to search, and right now, it's searching for you, for your return, for your voice, for for your name on the lips of your own prayer again, because the rosary was never meant to carry secrets. It was made to carry you. I do not fear demons. I do not flinch at darkness. But there are rosaries, specific ones, that I will not touch, not because they are evil in themselves, but because they have become paths, openings carved by desperate hands, forgotten sins, and misdirected devotion. Some beads burn not because of hell, but because of how many prayers were misused upon them. I recognize it instantly. I sense it the moment someone walks in holding a chain of sorrow disguised as faith. The weight is different, not physical, but spiritual, heavy like a secret too long withheld. She approached me once, grief-ridden, trembling. She held out her fiancé's rosary and asked if it could bring peace. The man had died suddenly. Unrepentant, she had kept the rosary close, hoping it would somehow cleanse what was left unsaid, but I didn't take it. I looked at her hand and said quietly, "He is still holding it." She broke down, not because she understood yet, but because her body knew before her mind did. She had been waking up, grasping, seeing flashes of someone else's room, praying words she didn't remember learning. And the rosary, beautiful, old, carved from olive wood, had begun to feel cold even in the sun. Not all cursed objects are violent, some are just unwilling to let go. I told her gently, not all grief should be prayed through. Some grief must be surrendered, and this is what no one teaches you. Sacred objects can become soul anchors, pulling you down, not lifting you up. When you use them to cling, rather than release, the rosary was meant to be a lifeline, not a leash, but you turn it into a chain when you use it to bind the dead, to hold on to rage, to force God's hand. You've done it, haven't you? You've whispered a name through clenched teeth. You've prayed for someone to return, not for their sake, but for yours. You've said, "Hail Mary," with a heart full of punishment, and the beads didn't burn in your hand. But something burned later, didn't it? Maybe it was your peace, maybe it was your clarity, maybe it was your sleep. I once took a man's rosary and, instead of blessing it, placed it inside a box and said, "Bury it where no one will find it. It's not broken, but what it remembers cannot be used again." And when I was asked why, I said, because if someone else touches it, they'll carry the voice that clings to it. Voice, not demon, not curse, voice. Because what most people don't understand is that prayer itself has residue. Words leave fingerprints. Repetition creates grooves. And if a rosary has been used for months, years, decades in misalignment with anger, envy, spiritual manipulation, then every bead holds a piece of that. You wonder why you've lost your voice when praying, why you feel disconnected even when holding something sacred, why your dreams grow louder even when your prayers grow softer. He came to me once, trembling, and began confession in Latin, perfectly spoken, but he didn't know Latin. I asked where his rosary came from. He said, "It was buried with my uncle, but I had seen that grave, and there was no rosary." But he didn't know Latin, not one word. I asked where his rosary came from. He said, "It was buried with my uncle, but I had seen that rosary before because 3 weeks earlier, I blessed that uncle's grave, and there was no rosary." Maybe it's not you, maybe it's the memory of who held the beads before you. Maybe it's the imprint of prayers that never reached heaven. I've warned you of the quietest dangers, the ones you sleep beside. The enemy doesn't knock, he waits where you rest. And rest for many of you means a rosary on the nightstand, a rosary near your heart, a rosary from a loved one, a rosary from a stranger, a rosary from a place you now realize you never should have visited, but by then, it's already listening. There's a reason I never allowed unblessed rosaries near my bed, not because I lacked faith, but because I understood how fragile the veil is between prayer and invitation. And so I ask you now, do you know where your rosary has been? Was it given to you in light or in shadow? Do you remember the first time you prayed with it and how you felt afterward? Don't guess, don't rationalize, feel it. Your body remembers what your mind has chosen to forget. The tingling in your hands, the heaviness in your chest, the sudden chills, the dream that always returns, the sound that isn't quite a whisper, but always comes after amen. When a soul prays with an unclean rosary, heaven hesitates, but something else steps forward. You still think it's just superstition that objects are neutral? Then why do you hide certain things in drawers? Why do you feel different when holding that rosary compared to another? Why do some prayers leave you in peace and others leave you trembling? Because it's real, not dramatic, not theatrical, just deeply, quietly real. And if I, after a lifetime of exorcisms, battles, and holy visions, refuse to touch certain beads, what makes you think you should sleep with them pressed against your chest? There are certain rosaries that we were forbidden to bless, objects found in exhumed graves, ones that had been placed on the tongues of the dying during black rites. In my order, we were told pray for the soul but never touch the chain. And I remember one case where the church ordered silence. I remember when a convent burned. They found 30 rosaries untouched by fire, but every crucifix had no face. And the bishop told us, do not speak of this again. And the bishop said, do not speak of this again. If you're unsure, if even now you feel a chill you can't explain, light a candle, place the rosary away from your bed, ask heaven to reveal what has been hidden, and whisper aloud, if this voice is not mine, release me. You might not hear an answer, but you'll feel one, a shift, a sigh, a silence that finally feels like peace, not pause, because some rosaries do not want to be near your soul, they want to become it. You didn't move, but it did. The rosary lay still, but the words kept going. It was sometime past midnight. You don't remember the exact hour, only the weight in the room, like someone else had exhaled through your lungs. Your eyes were closed, but something inside you was still whispering, a prayer, but it wasn't yours anymore. Let me tell you this now, the most dangerous prayer is the one you don't realize you're saying. You weren't awake, but your mouth had moved. You weren't conscious, but your soul had stepped aside, and the rosary prayed without you. That's the night the veil thinned. You always thought you needed to be holding it for it to matter, but no, the object remembers. The ritual remembers. The spiritual contracts you made in desperation, they remember. Even if you forgot, you begged for relief once, didn't you? You said, please take it away, just make it stop. But you never asked who was listening. And now, every night, it prays. For what, you don't know. Only that something is being asked through you, through the beads you left too close for too long. She came to me, tired and alone. She said, it's like someone else finishes my prayers now. Her priest didn't believe her, but I did. I asked her only one question. Where do you keep your rosary? She said, under my pillow. I sleep better with it there. I closed my eyes and said nothing, because the damage had already been done. She wasn't being haunted, she was being borrowed. You may not hear the voice, you may not see the shift, but your soul knows. The nightmares aren't just darkness, they are instructions. The cold spot on your spine isn't bad circulation, it's a presence passing through. And every Ave Maria whispered without your spirit behind it is an invitation renewed. I've said it before, almost in grief, they don't possess the body, they wear the prayer. That's what's happening. Something is using the shell of your devotion, something is mimicking reverence to stay close, to stay inside. You think this is extreme, that you'd know if it were happening? Let me ask you, when was the last time you held that rosary and truly felt heaven respond? When was the last time you prayed and your heart broke open, not your skin? When was the last time you called on Mary and it didn't echo? Or have you gotten used to the stillness, the silence that lingers a second too long, the peace that feels more like sedation than safety? Tell me in the comments. Whisper if you have to. Let someone else know they're not insane for feeling watched while praying, because someone else needs to know. The rosary isn't always praying to heaven, and tonight, if you don't reclaim it, it will pray again, without you. But there's still a choice. You can reclaim your voice, you can reset what was bound, not with rituals, not with drama, but with the one thing they cannot mimic, ownership of the soul. She came to me trembling. She asked if her prayers still belonged to her. I gave her no water, no rite, just a sentence. I didn't give her holy water. I didn't perform a rite. I gave her one sentence. Speak as if God is listening, and as if the silence is lying to you. So tonight speak. Hold the rosary in your hand, not with fear but with fire. Say aloud, every word that was not mine, I cancel. Every presence that used my prayer, I reject. Every memory in this object that is not holy, I release. Then pause. Let the room breathe. Let your body feel if there's a shadow that doesn't belong, it will feel that light. You don't need to burn the rosary. You don't need to bury it, but you do need to bless it again, with presence, with truth, with your own name spoken into every bead. Because they only take what you abandon. They only stay where you don't return. And now it's time you return to the place you left when you gave your prayer away, to the voice that was once yours, to the rosary that no longer remembers who it belongs to. And hear this well, the soul is not stolen, it is surrendered in pieces. Take it back piece by piece. Tonight, the rosary does not get to pray without you.